relationship we initially met at work, where we were colleagues in different departments. Our solid and respectful friendship eventually. I can hardly believe I'm in this situation. I'm not sure where to begin. My fiancée and I have been together for 5 years. I'm in my she's in her early 30s, we're scheduled to get married this summer. Our love remains as strong as it was in the first few months of our blossomed into something more throughout our time together. We've been genuinely happy. Our bed life is satisfying, we have no financial worries, and we share trust, respect, open communication and common interests. We have a lot of fun together, and there's no mistrust or insecurity when we pursue our individual interests. One thing I must confess is that when we first met at work, she was engaged to someone else. While I never engaged in any unfaithful behavior, I'm not that kind of person. I have to admit there were moments when I felt she flirted with me inappropriately. Fast forward to this past September with more under control in our area. We hosted a small dinner party for 3 other couples on a Saturday night. My fiancé, who enjoys hosting such events, insisted on assigning seating at the table for everyone. She sat between one of her close female friends and the friend's husband, whom I'll call Bob. During the meal, as I moved between them, glanced back at my fiancé and Bob, it appeared as if they were holding hands under the table. I looked away, rubbed my eyes, and went to the kitchen in the dining area, while everyone chatted happily and enjoyed some drinks. I caught what seemed like an odd sight. When I looked back, they were not doing that anymore. But it was one of those moments when it's like discovering a break-in at your house. Return home, and your eyes register the chaos. But your brain takes a moment or even minutes to process it all. In fact, part of your brain tries to convince you that this isn't what it looks like, or you did this but you forgot, you left the place like this. It was a similar feeling. Active on Facebook, with many friends. So she spends a lot of time there, during our relaxation sessions. However, starting in November, consequently, I started to become more watchful of her, and felt less secure in our relationship. Fast forward to November, and I began to notice something. Some nights when we were both exhausted, we liked to unwind in front of the TV, each with our laptops or phones. But I don't think I was imagining it, as we used to be able to see each other's screens when sitting on the couch together. Before this continued the present day, I noticed that she positioned herself just subtly enough so that I couldn't see her screen. It was a subtle change. Considered inviting Bob and his wife to our planned January vacation. However, I dislike Bob, and a lingering feeling of unease made me hesitant, but since I couldn't provide solid reasons for excluding them, my fiancé grew frustrated with me in any case. Due to circumstances like Koi, we ended up having to cancel the holiday. After reading many threads here, I realize unfortunate in some ways, because we're not married, have no kids, and I lack concrete evidence of anything going on. However, my intuition is on high alert though. Should I consider taking steps to essentially spy on her? This could involve hiring a private investigator using a voice-activated, not at a critical level yet. I'm starting to feel ashamed of how much this emerging obsession is affecting my life. Here's where I need input. Recorder in her car, or which I see as a major violation of boundaries, attempting to access her various devices. I'll conclude this as I began it. Then and now, particularly in our bed life, the frequency of our closeness has subtly decreased, which isn't inherently problematic, as can't believe I'm in this situation. Update before I clarify further. It's essential to mention that I registered here about a month ago. I wrote my initial post sometime before that, as it felt good to get my thoughts out at the time. However, a significant change has occurred between relationships have their ups and downs. What stood out was an incident about a week ago that prompted me to return here and gather the courage to post. After we just had closeness, I suddenly realized that my fiancé had approached our bed life differently than usual. Not just on that occasion, but perhaps the previous 2-3 times, as well. So, without much forethought, I commented, "Hey, there's something." The next day she said, "I think you're imagining it. And besides, it's okay to change things up in that department once in a while, don't you? Different about the way you've been close with me." What struck me as odd was as she appeared startled. She denied it initially, but then think what's frustrating is that if I hadn't noticed the possible hand-holding incident, I probably wouldn't have been bothered or suspicious by subsequent clues, answers and questions. I'd prefer to gather evidence rather than confront the issue. Confrontation without Editing. Where should I position the voice-activated recorder? Your point about the short-term cost of hiring a private investigator versus the solid proof isn't my style. It's not entirely that I don't trust her, but my gut is telling me to be very concerned. My intuition is rarely wrong. Contacting her previous fiancé, because he unfairly placed more blame on me than her for their breakup. That's entirely inaccurate, but potential expenses of a messy divorce make sense. Additionally, I earn twice as much as she does. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have any luck. Wouldn't be a trustworthy or reliable source. Thankfully, we're renters for now, but we plan to purchase our own property by Christmas. Real estate in our city is outrageously expensive, so we've been taking it slow while we currently live together. It's a situation that could recall the last time I saw it lying around. This detail troubles me deeply, as does my blindness to what it might signify. Editing. Part 2. Be easily terminated, and we no longer work at the same place. Yes, sadly, she's had her phone glued to her for months now. I honestly can't. Weekend after Easter, providing a natural opportunity to observe her actions in my absence. Quick update. I've hired a private investigator. Should mention that I've started the investigative process in several ways. Additionally, I have a business trip out of town scheduled for and they begin their work tomorrow. I've realized that I can't wait for 2 weeks to ease my conscience. So last night I had a heart with my oldest and closest friend. He's now aware of what I'm going through, and I'm flying out to his city tomorrow evening for an extended weekend there. I've informed my fiancée about the trip, and her emotional response seemed oddly mixed. Regardless if something is amiss, it may become apparent during this opportunity. At this point, I've decided against using a voice-activated recorder with the example refundable deposits. In other words, this won't turn into a messy legal or financial situation. If she's cheating, I'll quietly exit the relationship without causing a scene. The potential trauma of discovering her infidelity is already overwhelming, and I don't need to hear her wedding set for September. We haven't invested a significant amount of money in it yet, and what we have spent can likely be recovered. She's indeed cheating on me with the individual I mentioned. I'm in shock and utterly devastated. On Friday night, he stayed overnight at our exchanging sweet nothings with another man. Furthermore, as some of you have gently suggested, this situation has altered my perception of her, and it has shed light on potentially larger issues in the relationship, even without infidelity. I just met with the private investigator, place with her, and didn't leave until the next morning on Saturday night. For some reason, they stayed in a hotel until the following morning. The private investigator has provided time-stamped photographic evidence. I'm too numb to write any further update. It's been quite a day. Good friend who knew about my situation provided tremendous support and was prepared when I shared the unfortunate news with him. Was on autopilot at work, but later in the afternoon I managed to take some time off in the afternoon. My friend went to Bob's wife's house, the other betrayed spouse. I apologize for my slow understanding of the acronyms. Here he rang the doorbell and personally handed her the photos of my fiancé and Bob. These photos are time-stamped and explicit, leaving no doubt about what was happening. Perhaps the most troubling one is from the hotel where they were kissing at dinner, and then the next morning sharing a kiss goodbye in the parking lot. Her eyes a moment I'll never forget. For as long as I live. About an hour later, my friend went to my place, after delivering the photos to the It's baffling how brazen they were. They weren't even in another city. However, the worst one is the first photo from Friday night, when Bob arrived at my place. Since we live in a duplex, she had to open the front door to let him in. The photo captures the pure joyous excitement of the other betrayed spouse. He handed my fiancée a package I had prepared for her. Inside were the photos and a simple note from me. Expressed that my future goodwill toward her, not in person, but in my mind, would depend on her willingness to come clean about the whole truth. I informed her that our relationship was over, and I never want to see her again, let alone think about marriage. I gave her a clearly visible spot, not even 5 minutes before my friend dropped off the package with my fiancé. I missed 2 calls from her. She followed Thursday afternoon to move out of our place, which I entirely cover financially, and I requested that she leave her engagement ring in a up with several nervous texts asking my whereabouts, why I wasn't answering, and why I wasn't at work. I can only guess that Bob had called her in a panic, perhaps thinking someone was onto him and they could get away with it. After receiving my package about half an hour, I started typing this. I received 2 very emotional voicemails from her, The first one was nearly unintelligible as she screamed and cried. Before more missed calls and text from her asking me to call her, then came a text saying, "It's not what it looks like, unbelievable," just before. In the second she admitted that she couldn't deny the photo's reality, but claimed it was the first and only time they had ever done, which is unusual for me, but I texted only one thing in response. "I saw you two holding hands under the table at our dinner party," and anything she suggested that Bob took advantage of her when they got too drunk on Friday, and one thing led to another. I then told a lie. "Stop taking me for a fool, and tell the whole truth. I don't actually care what you have to say. But if you don't come clean to me, and thus make it undeniable. We are finished, however. If you want this to end as amicably as possible, you must do the right thing, and stop lying." September. The same private detective has been gathering evidence for months now. I only asked for the photos from this weekend to any response at all. I want to express my gratitude for the advice from people here, even those suggesting a more drastic approach, like sharing this with her family. However, that's not my style. I know myself well. This situation is, and will be, profoundly traumatic for me. To yourself about why you did this. I guarantee you will continue to repeat this destructive cycle for the rest of your life. I haven't received, not in my nature. My strength will come from not having an in-person conversation with her about this, permanently ending our survive. I must stay true to who I am while I appreciate stories of people seeking revenge for infidelity. Planning and executing such things as engagement, refusing to entertain the possibility of reconciliation, and asking her to vacate our shared space. Lastly, I have to admit, a petty.
You look better looking than him.
I know it sounds superficial, but it's true. I've often been compared to a well-known British movie star in romantic thought, despite my efforts to remain composed and dignified while writing this. Although Bob is younger than me, somewhere between her age and mine, he is less intelligent, less emotionally sensitive, something I thought she valued. And the ironic part is that I'm objectively much comedies. This guy, while more muscular, looks like a bulldog. I just can't comprehend it. He and his wife also have 2 young kids. So there's that too. I apologize for not fully addressing various questions some of you have asked this past week, but I feel like I've been navigating from one nightmare to the next. At least now I have the peace of mind that I'm not losing my sanity. I have a therapy session booked for the scattered nature of this message, but it reflects the state of my mind. Update. As expected, the past day and a half has been incredibly tough. On Monday night, my now ex-girlfriend figured out where I was staying, came over and insisted that my friend let her in. He did. Next Tuesday, the earliest available, and I'm staying with my friend. Fortunately, he's single, so I'm not inconveniencing the family. I'm also sorry. Allow her in, and in fact he had to physically stop her from entering. This led to a barrage of texts and tearful voicemails, where she expressed a desire for a second chance, and claimed that the past weekend was the only time they had a physical affair. She admitted that it had been an emotional affair since last July 2020. I chose not to respond to any of her messages, so after a day of attempting to shower me with affection from Monday afternoon to Tuesday afternoon, her text turned nastier last night. She asserted that my attempts to break up her relationship with Bob and the other betrayed spouse were ineffective and would fail because the other betrayed spouse understands the value of forgiveness. I find it rather astonishing that she believes she has insight into the other betrayed spouse's mindset, and the other betrayed spouse has already granted such swift forgiveness. Finally, I broke my silence and asked her a simple question. Some hesitation. She essentially conveyed that because I'm a perfectionist, she stopped feeling like she could freely express herself with me. Early in our relationship, around the 2-year mark, she claimed that Bob makes her feel secure and protected, and that they can discuss anything. When I pressed her for details on how I hindered open communication, she could only recall minor arguments from the early stages of our relationship, which I believed we had resolved, and weren't solely related to my perfectionism. Despite everything, she wants us to try again and insists that she's willing to do whatever it takes. She has asked me not to confide in anyone such as my family or friends about this, because she believes we can fix it. I, however, don't believe her at all. At this point I feel completely drained of emotions and utterly exhausted. I haven't had a proper night's sleep since Sunday, so I might consider taking some sleeping pills tonight. On a final note, apology for the disorganization. My self-esteem has taken a severe blow. My emotional and spiritual image of my ex-girlfriend has been shattered. making any future with her impossible. Trust has been irreparably damaged. While I do have some sense of relief that I've avoided a life with someone of such low integrity, I can't help but dwell on physical aspects. I'm plagued by humiliating questions. Did I not satisfy her enough? During our intimate moments, was my physical appearance not to her liking? Did she desire a different body type? Although I have no knowledge of their actions, the mere thought is incredibly distressing. Update: the past week has been absolutely unbelievable. It's as if it flew by in the blink of an eye, yet it felt like an eternity. Wednesday night was a mess. My fiancée called me and adamantly declared that she would not move out under any circumstances. I responded by telling her that she had to, or else I would share the incriminating photos with her. Apologies for the previous night's altercation. She promised to pack her belongings and spend the weekend at a friend's place, pleading family. Harsh words were exchanged between us and I had a sleepless night. Thursday morning I received the sweetest text from her, full of with me not to disclose anything to anyone. She believed we could mend things and make them right. I questioned why I shouldn't reveal the real reason our wedding was off, and she insisted it would ruin any chance of reconciliation. I returned to my place on Thursday night. Has been invaded, yet your eyes fail to provide concrete evidence. Most of her belongings were gone, but she had left behind them, and it was incredibly difficult to be there. I mentioned before how it felt like a break-in, but with a twisted twist. Where you know your house engagement ring, something compelled me to reach out to my fiancé's ex-boyfriend, the one she cheated on with me. I found him easily on Facebook and sent him a message, letting him know I had something important to discuss, and asking him to call me. To my surprise, called within 45 minutes. Our conversation was brief, but impactful. I learned a crucial piece of information: their engagement had ended. Drove the 3+ hours to his town. The next day I finally had the chance to reflect on the incredible 100 hours or so in my life. Because of her repeated infidelity, he had an event to attend that night, but invited me to have dinner with him the following evening. As revelation that my wayward fiancé had cheated on the previous man filled me with a whirlwind of emotions: anger, relief, sadness, confusion, embarrassment, and many more. About an hour away from his place, I mustered the courage to pull over at a picturesque rest stop. I dialed the number of the other betrayed spouse, not expecting her to answer. To my surprise, she did. There were lengthy, tearful silences on her end. She revealed that her husband had cheated on her before their wedding, and when she was 6 months pregnant with their second child, had worked through their issues, and as far as she knew everything was better. Disturbingly, despite her husband's multiple infidelities, statement that many people knew about my fiancé's infidelity with her ex-fiancé, but had kept it from me to spare my feelings. Finally, when I framed my wayward fiancé as the aggressor and her husband as the victim of a predatory woman, what shocked me even more was her inquired about her plans. She revealed that he was willing to do whatever it takes to mend things with my wayward fiancé, including, mentioned at the end of our conversation, was her eagerness to start over with him after Easter weekend, as he had an unexpected business, counseling, and full transparency. For these reasons, and more, she decided to stay with him. The most important detail she casually knew. My senses were on high alert, and I immediately contacted my excellent private detective to inform him of this development. After the initial exposure of the affair, he had advised me to retain his services a little longer, because it's common for exposed individuals like Bob to trip over the weekend, leaving on Friday and returning yesterday Monday with the fog of deception from my wayward fiancé, finally clearing, continue their affairs, but become more cautious about concealing them. Consequently, I authorized further investigative work on his part. Been betrayed by the same woman, each grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. However, the conversation gradually improved. He met with my wayward fiancé's ex, and we went to a steakhouse. The first 30 minutes were incredibly challenging, with two men who had both details about my wayward fiancé's numerous infidelities that he knew of during their relationship, and his deep regret for repeatedly. Could I be so foolish to be with an inferior man? When I have you. I could sense the mix of emotions within him upon learning about my taking her back. Strangely, what convinced him to reconcile with her was her comparing him favorably to her other partners, saying how situation. Part of him felt anger and sorrow on my behalf, but another part, on a more primal level, seemed relieved that his worst suspicions about her had been confirmed. I understood this complex response, and didn't interpret it as deriving pleasure from my suffering, but rather as finding closure that it wasn't about him or his shortcomings in their relationship. Understanding this partially thanks to this incredible. To simplify, my wayward fiancée posted a message stating that unfortunately the wedding was off. She added that despite our efforts to community was also liberating for me as much as Friday turned out well, Saturday was dreadful. I woke up to a venomous message on my private Facebook group, dedicated to the now and Canal wedding, consisting of the groomsmen, bridesmaids and our two main family aims. To spin the situation differently, I was utterly shocked, although, in hindsight, I can't say it was entirely unexpected. Many people here had addressed the emotional strain in the last few years of our relationship. I couldn't overcome my negative patterns, insinuating that I might cautioned me about this possibility. I won't delve into my emotions, or on that day I did nothing. I would later regret. In fact, I maintained complete silence, not communicating with her or the group, of course. My own family is aware of the situation. However, I can't help but wonder why she had a change of heart after her Thursday morning texts expressing a desire to reconcile with me. Was the allure of being with her Bob so irresistibly intoxicating her actions? Truly puzzle me. You would think she'd want to keep me around while enjoying a secret excitement of her affair. She must genuinely despise me if she could write a note like that, fully aware that I'll likely never speak to her. The poem had checked into a luxurious spa about 90 minutes outside of town that Friday night. More photos, more evidence they dined at. Again, it's both disgusting and astonishing, to make matters better, if that's even the right word. I later found out that my wayward fiancé and lovely restaurant in the spa resort, making it rather easy to capture numerous pictures of a couple deeply in love, seated beside each other. At this romantic getaway, I'm running out of energy for this update, so I'll try to wrap it up as succinctly as possible by yesterday afternoon. Armed with photographic proof from 2 affair-filled weekends, I selected the 6 most compelling photos and shared them with our Facebook wedding group. I apologized for the delay in responding to my wayward fiancé's deceitful Saturday message, explaining that I had been visiting her ex-fiancé, and was disappointed, though not surprised, to discover that she had engaged in similar behavior before. I asked the group to genuinely reflect on whether any part of me had ever appeared even remotely offensive, emotionally. I also inquired whether my wayward fiancé had ever mentioned to any of them, before the affair was exposed, that I was emotionally offensive. I felt that honest answers to these questions, in addition to the damning photos, would reveal the truth. I've received several supportive messages from most members of the group, with the ones from the bridesmaids providing an extra boost of encouragement. Her father has invited me for coffee this week. He holds me in high regard. However, I'm not entirely sure I want to meet him, despite our close relationship. Lastly, as liberating as it has been to break free from this tumultuous relationship that lasted 5 years, most of me is shattered beyond belief. I not only question my supposed ability to observe and understand someone I lived with for 5 years, but I'm also deeply concerned about the profound damage. Blake Lively, in terms of her looks. I hope it's okay to use celebrity names here. If not, I apologize and will edit it. I want to clarify that I'm not. This experience will inevitably inflict on all my future relationships. Yes, I am free, but I will never fully trust again. Update: I want to address something that many people have inquired about but I haven't mentioned yet. She is an exceptionally beautiful woman, often compared to. Mentioning this because I want her back. I'm simply highlighting that, throughout her life, she has always turned heads wherever she goes. Her ex mentioned on Friday night that part of the reason he kept taking her back was because he felt he would do anything to keep such a stunning woman in his life. Since discovering her infidelity, my attitude has certainly changed. However, it's possible that my biggest struggle right now, my complete and utter blindness to what was happening, stemmed from believing that the woman inside mirrored the beauty on the surface. I didn't hire a private investigator to gather more proof, because the initial photos told me everything I needed to know. What left me in disbelief was the fact that after all that, both she and he could within days continue their affair so openly, as if D-Day meant nothing. Part of me had thought that the private investigator might find nothing this past weekend. Those photos shattered any lingering hope that this could be overcome. I appreciate the harsh reality check provided by the additional evidence. I wanted to give her the opportunity to confess to her family and our wedding party on her own terms. Some of our discussions last week indicated that she might take that option. My basic thread of saying, if you don't tell the truth about why the wedding is off, I will have to be the one to do it, was not some kind of game. Update: I'm currently out of town on a business trip, And now that I'm alone in my hotel room, it feels like the first time in a while that I can breathe and reflect. On Wednesday, I contacted the other betrayed spouse and requested a meeting with her. Said she understood why I wanted to meet, and that she didn't want to endure more pain. She's a close friend of one of the bridesmaids. Told her that meeting with me and seeing the photos from the second affair weekend might unexpectedly empower her in the long run. Who informed her about my Facebook post. I expressed my concern to her about how her husband was continually causing her harm. She disagreed. My wayward fiancé has been reaching out through texts, calls and even emails ever since I posted about her second weekend of infidelity on Facebook. It's been 10 days and during this time I haven't directly responded to her at all. Her tone in the messages has shifted from anger and spite on the day of the Facebook post to sadness and despair in the middle of the week recently. She's been begging, pleading, negotiating, and making promises in her attempts to reach out. I discovered a handwritten letter from her in my mailbox. Decision to reveal the true reasons for canceling our wedding to our friends and family. Not only did immediately refute her false claims of explaining why she believes she deserves another chance, and outlining a plan to make amends for everything I believe it was the right against her for her infidelity and her audacity in suggesting that I was offensive. Part of me is superficially concerned that her suddenly being an offensive person, but it was also the least severe consequence of her not choosing the path of honesty to explain why our relationship ended. I've talked to the groomsmen and 2 of the bridesmaids, and it's evident that they swiftly supported me, and turned change of heart and desire to reconcile may be influenced by the community's response to her actions. I worry that if there had been less on that, I know it might disappoint some of you. But I agreed to meet with her father on Thursday. We met for afternoon drinks at his golf condemnation from our group, and if a few had believed her lies, she might not be so quick to beg for my forgiveness. However, I can't dwell. Club, and our conversation was long, difficult, and intricate. Her father holds a prominent position in our city, and is a highly influential individual. I need to be cautious with what I share. Beyond that, he confided in me that he had 2 significant affairs when my wayward fiancé was younger, something she never disclosed to me. He feels responsible for her infidelity towards me, explaining that she has always looked up to him. He admitted that he didn't do a good job of explaining to his daughter when both affairs were exposed why his actions were so wrong and how they might have harmed her mother, the children, and the extended family. He told me that my wayward fiancé has never loved another man as deeply as she has loved me. And this is the first time someone has held her accountable for her poor behavior. He suggested that I possess significant power in this situation, and have an opportunity akin to a god, to grant his daughter forgiveness and redemption. He believed that my ability to forgive her and rebuild our relationship would not only demonstrate greatness, but also ensure her unwavering loyalty to me for life. I must admit that there was a certain allure in the ideas surrounding those words. However, he made a mistake when he mentioned that due to his influence and reputation, he could open doors for me through certain means. I see how his name could indeed enable such actions. Yet when he proposed this to me, I lost my composure in a split second. I realized that there was little difference between his belief that his name and power could absolve any wrongdoing, and my wayward fiancé's belief that her physical beauty could excuse her numerous infidelities. Thanks to the insights I've gained from this thread, I found the words to respond her again. I would need to see genuine understanding, empathy, self-awareness, and sincere remorse. I also noted her journey towards that. I don't think you understand. It will take years for your daughter to re-enter my life in any capacity, I explained. For me to consider being with will be long, as she has engaged in this behavior for years, and her damage runs deep. To his credit, he respected my stance and asked for more time on Friday morning, a few hours before I was scheduled to go to the airport. The other betrayed spouse called, and with a trembling voice requested to meet for coffee. I agreed to meet out of respect and dignity. I won't divulge the details of the painful minutes we spent together. However, witnessing the second set of photos was a harrowing experience for her. And it was difficult for her to process. By the end of our conversation, though, she seemed to be making some progress in coming to terms with the reality of her husband's actions, with one of her own friends, no less. I believe she has started her own slow and challenging journey towards healing, empathy for how I might be feeling, but went on to share that her daughter had confessed all the details of her affair to her. She mentioned and sensitive situation further. Finally, yesterday, just before dinner, I received a lengthy email from my wayward fiancé's mother. Briefly considered directing her to this thread, but I ultimately decided to keep this private, not wanting to complicate an already complex, though my pain and emotions in all of this were relegated to a mere afterthought update. I got back home yesterday evening, and true her word, my wayward fiancé had left a handwritten letter in my mailbox. Initially I resisted the temptation to open it, and even went to bed. That her daughter was utterly broken, and she requested that I to some extent take time to consider giving her another chance. It felt as sleep on it, gather my thoughts and then share a summary of the letter here. So here I am today. She began with a straightforward apology, undecided about whether I should read it at all. However, sleep eluded me, and I eventually gave in opening the letter. My intention was expressing her deep regret for the pain she has caused me. Next, she mentioned that she and her Bob have decided to end their relationship for good. She then delved into explicit and almost clinical detail about how I had been her best lover, offering comparisons to Bob and her previous partners. While I no longer care about this aspect, I'll give her credit for the level of detail she provided, which was both unusual, somewhat touching. She proceeded to lay out a timeline of how things unfolded a few weeks before the September dinner party, where I suspected they were holding hands under the table. Bob called her to discuss his marital issues with his wife, who happened to be my wayward fiancé's friend. Apparently he sought her insights. They met for coffee one workday morning, roughly 7-8 days before the dinner party, which led to a week of texting between them. On the morning of our dinner party, while pretending to be on an extended shopping trip, they met in a park. There he confessed his deep infatuation for her. She admitted to feeling ashamed for falling for his words. His primary argument was that if she felt even a fraction of what he did for her, she should scratch that itch before committing to marriage. She claimed she firmly declined his proposition, but during the dinner party that same evening, he played footsies with her under the table. She regarded it as unlucky that I happened to glance back just as he made physical contact with her. She mentioned he initiated this as well. Their first kiss happened in late October, incredibly while she was visiting an affair partner and the other betrayed spouse's home for drinks and dinner during a weekend when I was away. Another betrayed spouse had gone to put their children to bed after dinner, and during this time he passionately kissed my wayward fiancé while his wife was out of the room. She acknowledged it was wrong but found it thrilling. Throughout November, he apparently pressured her heavily to get me to agree to have him and the other betrayed spouse join us on our January vacation. A significant portion of their text messages in November and December revolved around various scenarios he devised for them to engage in an illicit affair right under our noses. She provided vague details about when their affair began, mentioning it started in early February. They insisted on meeting in my house as often as they could manage. She claimed that his ultimate thrill was to humiliate me. Surprisingly, her main argument was as follows. She acknowledged that infidelity might run in her family, or be in her DNA, but she claimed she was completely willing to leave all of that behind, because I am the perfect man. Her twisted logic was that by having this affair she could cleanse herself of her demons and prepare for a committed life with me. She also mentioned that one of the main attractions of the affair was her strange aversion to this man. The very one who made her feel safe and secure, combined with his desire to humiliate me. Believed her self-disgust for choosing him would finally help her overcome her last temptation to cheat. Additionally, she stated that she would be living with her parents indefinitely. She expressed her intention to undergo therapy for the first time in her life. She promised to write me a monthly letter to update me on her progress. She claimed she wanted to win me back, but only on my terms. She admitted that